kind of.
You welcome me back, man.
Well, I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it matters. It's good to see you again. What's up,
Hey,
Nathan?
Jonah, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm very good. Thanks for coming back on and having a conversation with me.
Anytime, absolutely.
Good. So we got the intro out of the way. So let's talk about anxiety.
Where do we start?
Very important subject, isn't it? I just pulled up a statistic. I'm going to read it off just to begin this thing. I got this from John Hopkins, johnhopkinsmedicine.org. So approximately 18% of people ages 18 to 54 in a given year have an anxiety disorder in a given year. And of course, this includes panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and phobias. So and this is actually on the rise. This has been a kind of a we have a mental health crisis in the United States, and one of the leading mental health crises is anxiety, along with depression, but because those two are very closely tied. But you and I both have had experience with anxiety. You and I have both struggled with anxiety a lot, and maybe still currently do a lot. And I thought it would be a great conversation to talk about, specifically coming from your psychological perspective and my philosophical/meditative perspective. So, I guess to get things going, I'd like to. What do you think, or how would you define anxiety?
Well, in my own personal experience, well, how I explain my anxiety is kind of a fixation on things that I anticipate, but have really no control over. Even things that are likely not to happen. But yeah, I'd say it's fixation on things to come, and yeah, basically a need or want, desire to control them, and an inability to do so.
Yeah, I agree with that definition. It's like it's a fear of the future, essentially, but
Yeah,
not like such a fear of just the unknown, but more so an obsession, like
yeah,
a constant recapitulation in the mind of some fearful potential act that may never happen, but is played over and over again in our heads.
yeah. And I think another distinction in it is a want to control it. A need for the certainty of a more positive outcome, as opposed to, I mean, because you can be afraid of something that's going to happen in the future, like being pretty sure that you're going to get fired tomorrow, but not necessarily have bad anxiety, but still have some sort of
Right.
healthy fear around it.
Yeah, there's certainly a difference between just being afraid of something in the future, like you said, getting fired possibly, or having to go jump out of an airplane or
Yeah,
something like that, that's happening tomorrow, and having living with a constant fear, I would say that it's debilitating. Like every day, waking up with just the feeling of anxious, just excited for no reason. And it's pretty terrible, honestly. It's not fun, and a lot of people experience it. It's a real problem, for sure. But
yeah. Where do you first see your experiences with anxiety arise?
well, I mine. I'm a lifelong hypochondriac because my dad was a doctor, and so at the age of 11, he showed us. He had four children. He showed us on video an autopsy of a 26-year-old woman. An autopsy. She's spread out naked on a table, and they proceed to cut her open. And my dad, there's even a point where they cut open her skull, and my dad's holding up her skull to this camera. And I think to him, he was just so interested in it, being a doctor, that he thought it would be cool to share with his kids what the human body looks like. But for me, it was a pretty traumatic it was a pretty traumatic video because not only was she, not only, you know, you get to see what the inside of a body looks like at 11, which I'm sure a lot of people have, but she died from this really weird disease where basically the symptoms are she had a small cold and a little sniffles, and then the next day she fell as she just died, and it ended up being some sort of like heart virus that ate away the atriums of her heart or something like that. Basically a silent killer. So that I can remember being the beginning of really being afraid of the future in the sense of my body, you know, and that was I was at 11. So, but that I would say sparked, you know, I was going to be a doctor for a long time, and my father and I would always have conversations about all the different ways you can die, and you know, it just sparked this incredible what is, you know, hypochondriaism. And even now I struggle with it. You know, I have a pain in my leg. I'm like, yep, that's a blood clot. Or I got like my liver, you know, over here. You can't feel your liver, but there's pain down there, and I'm like, yep, cirrhosis. I've been drinking too much. You know, stuff like that. It's just an automatic thing. But there was a point in college when it really developed into its full force, and I was sitting in my statistics class next to this girl, my first girlfriend actually, and she, I just overwhelmingly, there was nothing that caused it, nothing happened, but just total panic. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I had to like leave. I was about to pass out. It was so much panic. And from then on, I had these panic episodes for years, for many, many years, until I found meditation is really what happened. But before that, it was just just being alive and being awake was a constant terror and effort. It was really horrible in hindsight. And it comes up once in a while now, but it's nothing like it was. It was just terrible. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be sitting at my desk writing a paper, you know, for college or doing something, and then just, and like for no reason, and then I'm freaking out, like, oh, why am I freaking out? And I have to lay down and like put my feet up above my legs so I can get blood to my head because I feel like I'm passing out, like, you know, I'd wake up anxious, and it was just really bad. It was really bad. But how about you? How was your experience with that?
Well, real quick, I mean, it sounds like you had, you know, an anxiety attack, and you know, when we had those anxiety attacks, it's I had a girlfriend who would have anxiety attacks regularly, and the fact that she couldn't predict, you know, when an anxiety attack is going to happen, just compounded the possibility or the probability, I guess, that she was going to have one. You know, so
Yeah.
and you know, if you have one in public, and then you start thinking about like, what if I have one? What if I have it? You're just it's this spiral down into it. But my experience with it, I've thankfully not had any attacks in public. I've mine comes from my tendency to overthink, just kind of having an overactive mind. I remember staying up late, unable to sleep, just thinking about different possibilities of what's going to happen, and having anxiety about not being able to sleep, having anxiety about having to wake up early, and for kind of really as long as I can remember. They talk about how, like, my parents talk about how I had these bags under my eyes all the time as a kid, and it wasn't until recently that I was like, yeah, it's because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep as a kid, and they had no idea, but I believe my anxiety comes from, yeah, my tendency to for my mind to, you know, take the keys and drive away, you know, leave me right here.
Yeah, it feels like, yeah, I feel like most anxiety must be something like that, something
Hmm.
about overthinking, because it's always like anxiety isn't just like you're having happy thoughts and then you're having this weird feeling of excitement and just debilitation, and then it doesn't just happen like that. And then I mean it always is along with thinking. Anxiety and thinking go hand in hand. Thinking bad thoughts too. There's a great Buddhist um, named Ajahn Brahm, who I'm actually going to go see in Australia soon. But he says he has the greatest definition of anxiety, and he says anxiety is, what did he say? Looking to the future with a bad attitude. Looking to
Yeah.
the future with a bad attitude. Now I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, because it really is. It's like it becomes this. The mind just picks up speed. Like, what if this is cancer? Then every time I feel my leg, I'm like, oh no, there's that pain again. Oh, it's probably cancer. And you go to the doctor, they're like, you're fine. You're 21 years old. You're fine. You're like, okay, I'm fine. You go back home. It's like, yeah, but what if the doctor missed something? It was wrong. So it's just this constant thinking, flowing. And we feel like it kind of comes up behind us, or at least for me, it feels like it came up from behind me, and I could never get control of this thought thing, this mass of anxious thinking. And I mean, yeah, and it's, it's terrible. I have so much compassion for those who go through that today, especially when they feel like there's no way out. And that's I think should be the second part of this conversation, the way out, because there really is a way out. There really is a way out without medicine. So, yeah. Anyway, so do you, is this something that you continue to suffer from on a regular basis?
If I'm not paying attention, if I am not taking care of myself, yeah, no, there's definitely some periodically spikes in anxiety. I mean, especially in the last couple of years with everything that's going on. I know you mentioned kind of a spike with COVID and pandemic happening and things of that nature. Just kind of a isolation from the things that I would normally do to take care of myself contributes to that rise.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that COVID has brought about, the lockdowns particularly has brought about a lot of anxiety, because people who would just go out and do something, like kind of get away from the house, get away from things, now they're forced to be alone in their own homes. Well, they were. Now pandemic's pretty much eased off now. But it's to me, it's indicative of a much deeper issue, a much deeply rooted thing, and that is that our culture isn't really concerned with our mind. Mental health, even though Mental Health Day was like created in 1945, or Mental Health Month was 1945 or something like that, something late like that, yet it's totally out of our common sense. To take care of our mind isn't really something, it's just, it's not valued very much in this culture. Not today, it is more, because so many people are suffering. I think it's something like 50% of people in the United States alone are on some sort of psychoactive medication for mental health issues. And now, of course, here we go again with stating things without actual dictation or citation. But it is an issue. It is an issue. And I think that this is where we can learn, personally, what I have learned are, ideas from the East. Many practices from the East, such as meditation, and also different philosophies of the East. That, anyway, let's go into. I do wonder, what do you think is the culprit for anxiety? Why is it that so many people are having this issue now? Or do you think that it's not any more than it used to be? It's just that now people are aware of it.
Well, I mean, there's some accompaniment with this pandemic, right? So in my experience with anxiety, this is something that I haven't touched on yet with so the overthinking, but also another thing that had a large influence on it was end of times talks, uh, in family and church and things like that. So as at a pretty young age, I'd already felt like my future was, was taken from me. Like I don't have a future, and it's the end of times. Like what? And so
Wait, you
there's,
thought that the end of time was going to happen within your lifetime?
well, yeah, no, that, I mean, because that is one of the things that would be communicated to me as, yeah, a kid, and there are just deeply rooted losses of future, in those experiences. I mean, if you are convinced, or not even really convinced, but like if it's talked about enough and told to you enough, there's a cynicism that comes about from those conversations, from that type of attempt to convince me. And it's not, I guess, really that I feel like I consciously believe that, but there's some subconscious factor there that limits what I see as possible for my future, or did. That's something that I've had to observe and work on in the last several years. But I think people have trouble with vision in their future. I mean, we see kind of a spike accompanying like social media and internet, and kids not being outside and doing things that build resilience and self worth. And as opposed to doing those things, they're on the internet. They're um, actively posting and trying to get these quick dopamine hits of validation, and we have a tendency to search for that in this era, and seek that out. And I think that has a little bit to do with it. I'm sure there's other variables, but in my experience, I attribute a lot of my anxiety to um, feeling like I don't have a future, fundamentally.
That's interesting. I can definitely see how that would be a point of anchor for an anxious life, you know. Um, and there actually are, man, I'm not gonna quote any more stats off the top of my head anymore. I suspect, I suspect that rates of anxiety are higher within. Well, maybe I shouldn't think that.
Go ahead. What do you
Maybe I
think?
don't think that. Well, I was gonna say I think that rates of anxiety may be higher in religious communities, but I've heard the opposite. I've heard that mental health problems and anxiety and stuff like that are actually not as prevalent in like Christian communities, for example, because there's a sense of community. There's a sense of like a future. Even though the world's going to end, their world isn't ending. This world is ending for a better cause, for the basically the salvation of mankind, and for those who haven't been justly punished to be punished, and those to be saved to be saved. And so, like, I have people in actually everyone in my family except my sister are Christian, and they all think this, and it gives them a sense of hope, a sense of living for the future. That's why I find it's an interesting thing that you have, that you feel this lack of future, because with the Christian, a little bit off topic, but what the Christian attitude promises is, or the Christian faith promises, is a infinite future. So that to me is interesting that you felt this lack of future because of the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I also didn't relate to them in the sense that I didn't. It didn't really make much sense to me. That I mean, that like you said, this is a completely different topic. But I feel like you have to accept that, and you have to wholeheartedly believe for it to not induce anxiety. And the problem that I had is the rationalization of the message in general, and it's just something that I wasn't accepting.
Yeah.
And so
When
if
I met you, well, go on.
well, and so if you don't accept it, then yeah, it's anxiety inducing
Right.
because you're not really a part of that community. You're an outcast without being outed,
I can certainly see that.
and so you
And
feel
I
even more lonely.
right. No, I get that. I mean, that hits home for me because I'm a very outspoken atheist, and if you haven't noticed, but and within my family, maybe I shouldn't speak for them, but I know the attitude is that he's kind of a lost soul. You know, he's missing the point. They remind me constantly that I need to come to Jesus and that that's the thing that I need. You know, as if they know. You know, they know what my life needs. It's kind
Yeah.
of funny, but I could see that feeling of being ostracized, not outwardly, but kind of subliminally. You know, like I, you know, the reason your things aren't like if I ever have a problem and I want to come to my family for that problem, I know that I can tell that they're holding back because they want to say, well, just accept Jesus into your life and this will be good for you. This is really your problem, not, you know, your little the little things that you're going through right now.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's interesting. So to kind of tie the loop, big point for you is that religious belief is what caused a lot of your anxiety. Yeah, go on.
Well, it's more not necessarily religious belief. I don't have a problem with what I might have genuinely believed, but a certain dogmatic like indoctrination into something that I didn't accept, I didn't agree with.
Right. Although when I first met you, you were pretty Christian.
Yeah, I was in different churches too. I was in different conversations, and
But
still,
you were not like any other Christian though. You were very much thinking of you were more of like I would say the esoteric, mystical kind of type. Uh, the one who really thought deeply about things, which I there's a lot of them out there.
yeah,
But yeah, you were definitely different than that. Like that story you told me about how you were running in the canyon and just praying, and that story really resonated with me.
yeah.
Well, anyway, so that's interesting. But to kind of go back to anxiety, why do you think though then do we have this crisis now? Obviously, we do have a predominantly religious culture. Most people are Christian in this country. I think it's over 85% now. It's declining, but still the majority. And maybe that's the cause. But personally, I feel that the cause has to do more with our culture being generally mistaken about the mind. We as human beings have this wonderful opportunity to actually be able to look introspectively at our happenings within our head. You know, I'm not sure dogs and cats can do that, but we can. We can notice things happen in our minds, and we can actually directly look at it. Yet, this is something that Eastern philosophy and Eastern people have done for millennia. Even older than the Bible, people have been meditating and looking introspectively at their mind, and the mind was, you know, really, really important to investigate. And I still make that argument that the mind is the basis for everything we do. Everything we do. There's nothing that we do that doesn't include our own minds. So the most important thing to investigate is our mind. Yet our culture kind of says, yeah, but that's some weirdo stuff, and yeah, that's a little bit esoteric. You know, you should just accept Jesus, and that's what you need. It's a little bit of a straw man, but I think people are hesitant to introspect into the nature of their own awareness. And because of that, mental health is running rampant. But not only that, I think what you were saying earlier is really important. Social media. Social media has brought about the biggest, I would say, epidemic of people comparing themselves to others. And as, who was it that said, Roosevelt, who said that comparison is the thief of joy, and it's absolutely true. Uh, and that's a lot of social media is that. And now we have cyberbullying and people literally ending, like children ending their lives because of cyberbullying, because how they are perceived online. And this seems to be a large source of the problem, is that we kind of dump all of our attention into our devices and our social media and worry about our image and what we believe and all that, yet we don't take time in silence to just look at our own minds. It's such a simple act. We used to do it naturally before technology because there's so much freaking time on our hands. Like you have to sit on the porch and just stare off in the sunset because there's nothing else to do. So your mind becomes very clear then. One of my favorite quotes is actually by somebody I heavily disagree with, Blaise Pascal, who wrote Man's Wager, the famous argument for the existence of God. But he had a great quote that he said that most of humankind's problems would be solved if they would just sit in a room alone in silence. And what a great quote. I butchered it because I'm paraphrasing it, but anyway, to me, that's where the root is really our inability to pay attention to our minds, because we're paying attention constantly to other things outside of us. Our world is constantly seeking our attention, and we're giving it to it.
Yeah.
News and media and everything.
Yeah, there's also a tendency to escape what is potentially painful when you look internally. I mean, many people fear introspection. Many people fear to be alone by themselves with their thoughts. And I understand, but
To be honest, it's understand. Yeah, it's definitely understandable, and also why I think with the pandemic, that was why a lot of this started showing up, was because people had to face themselves a little bit more than they usually do, and they don't. We don't want that.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so you spend more time online, and so it's not that they were forced to spend time introspectively. It was, okay, well, how do I occupy my mind so I don't have to do that?
Right. I think most people are extroverts. So I used to think that extroverts were half and half, like extroverts and introverts. It's half introverts, half extroverts, but it's more incredibly amount more. Most people, we can say, most people are extroverted. Not very many people are introverted, and so those who are introverted are okay with being alone. They're okay with being with their minds. They're okay. In fact, they need it. Those who are extroverts, having them be alone and find something to do, of course they're going to seek something that is distracting. We're in the age of distraction. We are constantly distracted. So having and asking and telling people, hey, if you just paid attention a little bit, sit in some silence and look at what's happening in your mind when you're at the peak of anxiety. So that's what I did. And I kind of want to shift the conversation into some of the solutions, because I consider myself a success story when it comes to anxiety and depression and other things, other mental things like that, but really anxiety and panic disorder. How would you say that do you think, because you told me that your anxiety has alleviated for the most part, would you consider yourself kind of a success story in terms of anxiety?
Yeah, I would.
How
Absolutely.
do you mind sharing how you did that?
A lot of mine arises, as we've said, or as I've said, surrounding a loss of future. So for one thing, attempting to uproot or understand like why that is, and that's why I can articulate that. I think a lot of it is from a religious background. So because I've investigated, I've asked those questions and written a lot about it. I think that writing down those thoughts, those feelings, and then a vision of what you actually like envision for your future, and then having actionable steps, goals different achievements to head in that trajectory, go that direction. That helps me. But something that is actionable in an immediate situation where I'm experiencing anxiety is a derivative of, excuse me, this grounding technique. I believe it's like cognitive behavioral therapy technique where the actual technique is like a 5 4 3 2 1 going through your senses, and I don't remember exactly what order it goes in, but it's, you look around, you find 5 things that you can touch, and you look around and you find 4 things that you can smell, and you look around and you find 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can what are all the senses? The taste,
Something, yeah.
yeah, and so you go through all the senses to just ground you, anchor you in the present. But I kind of took it. I'm very tactile. Like I'm a very like touch oriented person. Since I used to rock climb, I'd feel things. I'd touch different textures and grab on different walls. Just hands on everything. Hands on all kinds of objects. So for my grounding practice, I would look at things and I would imagine what it felt like in my hand. I wouldn't go up to it and touch it. I'd imagine what does it feel like until I'm to the point where I can actually feel what this camera looks like, or what this camera feels like, what this paper feels like, what my ceiling feels like to touch. And after breathing for one thing, breathing through it and going through this practice of just looking around, finding these objects that I could go physically touch, but I can actually just feel them in my hands without even approaching them. And so I also approached, I analogized it to emotions, or ideas and thoughts and thinking, I can walk up to that emotion, I can grab it, I can embrace it, and I can basically become it. I can walk up to that thought and I can become it, but I don't have to. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like in my hand. I know what happens if I go down that path with that thought, and I don't want it. I don't want to touch it. But I can observe that, this is what it feels like.
That's very interesting. That sounds a lot like meditation.
Yeah. It is
At
it is
least
a
it seems to achieve the same thing meditation does, which is, of course, being completely here
mhm,
now. Which is why I think another issue, what anxiety is worried about where you are not and where you
mhm,
will never be, because the only time there is now. And that was, I mean, for me, the road to away from anxiety really began with that idea. Really began with this present moment. That everything else is a thought form. Everything else is me thinking about something, and it's just thoughts in my head, all of
mhm,
it. So to begin with your smells, what do you, or I like what you said, but what do you see? What is in your environment? What is around you? And then what do you smell? What do you feel? What do you hear? What do you taste? What are these things at this moment? And you
mhm,
can't be thinking of the future when you're trying to smell a flower,
mhm,
or when you're tasting an orange, or looking around you at an object and really focusing or observing what is around you. That you can't be lost in thought when you do that. Yeah, and that was a big thing for me. That was a big thing for me, is that realization. Before regular meditation practice, that was my solution as well, which was breathing. So, you know,
yeah,
yeah. Most of the time, what I learned is that most of the time I feel like I'm a center of consciousness, a center of awareness right here, kind of like behind my eyes, between my ears, looking out through my eyes, but there's something behind my eyes looking. There's something that hears, and there's something that tastes. And that entity, that self, I think we talked about this last time, but that small entity person is really just because I pay attention to my thoughts all the time. So I feel like I am my thoughts, and thoughts happen right here, So I feel like I'm up here thinking. And so when meditation, I was instructed for the first time to just pay attention to how your belly goes in and out. So simple. And everyone knows this. This is part of our culture. Everyone knows meditation. You just pay attention to your breath in and out. But what that does, and what people I don't think understand about that, is that it removes your feeling of being a separate entity in your head. Because no longer is your attention constantly going on this flow of thought that, first off, you don't create. It happens by itself, just like our heartbeats. And to put our attention into our belly where there's just movement. And we only do that because it's easy, not because it's spiritual or anything, but just because movement is easy to focus on. And so removing attention from thinking into my belly was the beginning of a total destruction of anxiety. So even when it comes up now, it's more of an alarm for me. Not really like, oh, I need to get rid of anxiety. It's more so like, oh, I'm lost in thought. I'm thinking of the future. Oh, I'm not there. That's not where I'm at. I'm right here, just like what you do. What's around me? But I'm just right here. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
And I think, go on.
Well, I'm just gonna share a story about a friend who was experiencing anxiety and depression, and we sat down for coffee one day, and she was describing a trip that she took with her sister and her mom, and talked about how happy she was and how like she kind of forgot how sad she was, and she, as we're sitting there, she's like, well, why can't I just why can't I just feel that way? Why can't I just feel that way all the time? And I walked through it with her. I was like, you could recreate everything that happened on that trip. You could do moment by moment recreation, reenactment, and it wouldn't do anything for you. It wouldn't make you happy. Because what you did is you allowed yourself to be there. You allowed yourself to be happy. You didn't want to be anything but what you were. You didn't want to be anywhere else other than where you were. And that is the key there. I mean, even when it's sad, it's like the reason, even when you're sad, it's the reason that persists. A big reason that persists is because you want to be anything but.
Right. Running away.
Yeah. You want to be somewhere else. You want to be something else. You want to feel something else.
Right.
And and that's why it persists. Because you have to be present with it. You have to allow it in. You have to really accept it. Have you ever heard of Mark Manson?
No.
Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That book.
Yes.
Yeah. So he wrote that. He has a saying about accepting a negative experience is a positive experience. Wanting a positive experience is a negative experience. And wanting a negative experience is not going to lead you to a positive or wanting a positive experience is not going to lead you to a positive experience. And I was when it was phrased that way, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So in the moment that you accept your negative experience, you create a positive.
That's right. That's right. Because, yeah, step one to try to alleviate anxiety and to try to get rid of anxiety is don't try to get rid of anxiety. Step one, don't resist anything you feel because there are no wrong feelings. There are no and there are no feelings that are so intense that it'll kill you. We may kill ourselves as a result of those feelings. But that's, to me, confusion. The feeling itself will do nothing. Yeah, that's the thing. Step one, don't run away from your feelings, because it creates it worse. It's like trying to smooth rough waters with a flat iron, like an ironing board, and you take a flat iron, you try to smooth water with a hot iron. It's just going to make it worse. Trying to push something away that is in our mind is just our mind 101.
Mhm.
And so in Buddhism, because the subtle art of not giving a fuck is really Buddhism in a modern context. And yeah, that quote makes sense. He's a positive experience is an acceptance of a negative one. Or an acceptance of a negative experience is a positive experience. But an acceptance of any experience at all, ever, is a positive experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. It could be depression, it could be fear, it could be elation. But an acceptance of that is the key. Pushing it away, trying to do something else, is always going to cause trouble. One of my favorite analogies about life and came from Taoism, from Lao Tzu. And the best way I can explain it is basically the analogy of a river. In life, we're all flowing in this river. And no matter what we do, no matter how our minds work, how the circumstances, we have to go along with the river. We're going to die, and we don't really have control over our mental stability. It just kind of, we're born with our neurons, and we're born with our conditioning, and that's how it is. Now, I wouldn't say there's nothing you can do, but to the degree that we go against the stream of the river, we see how fast the current is rushing past us and fighting us. We're always fighting the stream. And most of us spend our days fighting the stream. We are in constant resistance to what is. And because of that, anxiety exists, depression exists as well, because things aren't going the way we want them to. We don't want the river to flow that way. We want to go this way. So we swim against it. But the key to life and the key to mental health, I think, or at least the beginning of mental health, is to go with the river. Just lay on your back and go with it, regardless of where it goes. Because when you go with the river, you see how still everything is. The water around you is very still. But when you're swimming against it, it's rushing past you. There's anxiety. But if you let go and just go with the river 100% with your whole heart, everything's still. Everything's okay. Anxiety can come, anxiety can go. Depression can come, and depression can go. But it's okay. And once we learn how to flow with the river, then we can swim with the river. We can start using the river to go where we want to go. But we have to go with it first. And that, to me, was a big eye-opener when I heard that for the first time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I think that step one to that, especially in Buddhism, but step one to anxiety and depression is don't run away. Whenever you see a ghost, don't run away. Go try to shake hands with it. Go try to give it a hug.
Mm-hmm.
See what it is. There's a great analogy of a rope in the road. Most of us are afraid of fear, afraid of anxiety, afraid of the future, afraid of this and that. We don't know what it is. It's kind of like a rope in the road, but it looks like a snake. So we're afraid of the snake. And we're so afraid that we're not willing to go up to it to see that it's just a rope. It's just a rope. But we don't know that because we're not willing to go see it. In the same way, we're not willing to introspect and look at our minds.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're afraid. We think that it's something that it's not. But unless we peek under the rug and see what we've swept under it, unless we go up to that snake and see that it's just a rope, we're always going to believe in our delusions. And so we're always going to suffer. Anyway, bit of an Eastern rant.
Yeah, no, there's this program that I do through the Animas Valley Institute. It's based in Bill Plotkin's books. like The Wild Mind is one of the books, and he goes over the map of the psyche in that book. And so when you explain it to somebody, it sounds a lot like a personality test. So there's like northeast, southwest, and it's really all archetypal. They're archetypes. And on the inner circle, you have what they call subpersonalities or protector traits, and that's usually we usually exhibit those through an unintentional fragmentation of the psyche. Versus on the outer circle are your four facets. And so in the East is the innocent sage trickster, but the subpersonality, the unintentional fragmentation, is the escapist, the bliss head, the addict. And so you find a lot of people there who, like the guy that's always the comedian when, subjects like kind of serious subjects come up, he has to joke about it. He has to make light of this
Right.
situation, which is can be done from a place of wholeness, can be done from a place of
Right.
that
Right.
innocent sage trickster, because it's necessary. Life can
Right.
always be serious. And
Right.
but on the other side, so this is it seems at first to be personality testing, like some kind of like, okay, well, what am I? How do I figure that out? Where's the test? It's usually where the conversations go, and it's not. It's reflective. It's a map. It's you get handed this map to figure out where you are and maybe where I should go. And so if you find yourself further in the east, maybe you need to go west. And in the west, it's the facet is like the dark muse beloved, and so you have your shadows there, and so and your muse. So you find a lot of like artists and people who are like extremely creative, but also take things pretty seriously and don't. They're dark. They're very dark. So it kind of has this connotation to it of it's a little more dangerous. It's a little more dark. It's a little more, but it's also a little more. What's the word? Appealing. It's seductive. There's mystery there, and so in those reflections on like this map, there is a tendency to see that I need to go west. I need to go introspectively, move into what is deeper, as opposed to run away from it. But
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting way of approaching it. Who was it that came up with this map?
his name is Bill Plotkin.
Bill Plotkin. So
Plotkin.
if anybody interested in Bill Plotkin, please
Yeah.
look at Bill Plotkin.
Yeah. No, we do like wild mind intensives and things like that. So it's essentially
Right.
ecotherapy. So you go camping and they walk you through some of these exercises, but it's extremely medicinal, and anxiety is a huge
Right.
subject in that.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean a lot of the therapy for getting rid of, like in my experience, getting rid of anxiety. I don't like saying getting rid of it. It's more like becoming friends with anxiety rather than getting rid of it. Because when you're friends with it, that friend kind of leaves you. And it's funny. There's a great Buddhist, Rinpoche. He's a pretty famous meditation teacher now, but he started off meditation like that because he always had panic disorder, and he has the funniest talk. He's so funny the way he talks, but he says, over time I became friends with my panic. Me and panic, we friends, and then one day my panic leave me. No more friend. you know, and it's like, and then he was kind of like sad that his panic left him because they were getting along,
Yeah.
but that's really the key to the mind is like the mind isn't not you. It's not like you have to deal with their mind, and that's kind of to me the big key here is that we all feel like separate entities in our head dealing with our mind, and we're not. We are a continuum of everything. So there are no wrong feelings. There are no anxious feelings or anything like that is wrong. It's just a lot of it has to do with our framing.
Yeah.
I mean, another interesting thing for me with anxiety particularly was somebody said, it's an old friend of mine. I used to live at this temple in Denton. You know where that temple is.
Mhm.
But this girl who lived next to us, she's actually a woman. She was in her 40s. We were about to do an ayahuasca ceremony. And was this legal to talk about? Can I talk about that on YouTube? Whatever.
I think so.
Whatever,
I
it
think
doesn't
it's
matter.
fine.
I'll talk about it. So we were going to go down to somewhere south in Texas, and this Peruvian ayahuasquero came up to give us ayahuasca, and we were going to do an ayahuasca ceremony. And sorry, Mom, if you're watching this. But before it, I was so anxious. I was debilitated. I couldn't work. I called off work. It was terrible. And I told my friend, Jenny, who was she was really, she's a wise woman. And she said, she looked at me with these big eyes. She's like, "You're anxious?" She's like, "I think that's excitement." And I was like, excitement?
Yeah.
And then I thought, what is really the difference between anxiety and being excited for something, like in a positive way? The physiology of it is exactly the same. The butterflies, the sinking feeling, the feeling that you can't do anything else because it's like it's in front of everything you do is this one thing, this moment, it's either cancer or you're going to Six Flags, or whatever. It's the same physiological fight or flight response. And I realized that framing, changing the way I thought about it, was significant to its alleviation. That instead of saying I'm afraid or I'm scared, I'm excited. Wait a minute. I actually am excited about the ayahuasca ceremony. I've never done anything like this. Being fearful was just a thought form. So it's kind of like, what do you want? Is playing the violin merely scraping horsehair with cat entrails, or the other way around, scraping cat entrails with horsehair, how they used to make them? Or is it something really beautiful and wonderful? Is playing the violin a wonderful thing? I mean, that's what it really, both are correct. It's the same way with anxiety. Are you afraid of getting cancer? Or are you just in an excited state? Are you excited about your current predicament? Is it excitement or is it fear? Is it excitement or is it anxiety?
Excited to have
just
cancer.
about how yeah. But it's more so that the feeling, because I think a lot of anxiety isn't so much about what we're anxious about.
Yeah.
In my experience, it was always more so, I'm afraid of being afraid. I'm afraid of the feeling of anxiety, and I'm afraid that it's going to lead to a panic attack. I'm afraid that I have this feeling.
Yep.
And I kept trying to go away from it, yet the biggest solution for me was to go straight at it, 100%. In fact, there were times where I would, this really helped too, is like, okay, I'm anxious, I have anxiety, okay. Let's see if I can get even more anxious. How anxious can I actually get?
Yeah.
And play a game. Like, okay, let's get really anxious. Let me think about the thing I'm really anxious about a lot. And forcefully try to get anxious. And then it would just dissipate, and I would be almost frustrated. Like, I can't get more anxious. The more I try to get anxious, the less I get anxious. Like, well, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
And that's because we're all in a river.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
getting anxious is going with it.
Well, I've done that with depression. I talk about this on my podcast. It's called paradoxical intention, right? The more you try to fall asleep, the further
Right.
away you get.
Right.
But if you try to stay awake, you'll fall asleep.
Out. Yeah.
So I've done that where I try to be as sad as I possibly can. I tell my little brother this on the podcast. I'm like, I try to be the saddest sad boy ever. I put on the saddest music. I watch the saddest movies. I purposefully try to make myself cry as much as possible, and I can't. And there. I mean, I guess it's not that I can't. I end up day or two later. I'm like, you are silly. Like, what is this? Just laughing about it because it has become a game. It has become uh, this playful thing as opposed to what I thought it was.
We think it's poor little me.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the root of it. Poor little me. I wish I wasn't like this. I wish things were different. It's like going out from ourselves.
Yeah.
And and you're right, because anxiety and depression are so closely related. It's a lot of the same thing. But we keep running away. And instead of running away, the solution or a lot of the alleviation. Now, of course, major depression, major anxiety, there's different things with that. And I hope people don't take this as medical advice, but the things that have helped me is turning attention back to me, going straight at it, push it 100%, push it all the way. How far can it go? And it's just emotion, it's just sensation, but that also leads into, meditation, which I would love to have a conversation with you about at some point. But how that's what meditation is. It's being totally present with what there is. As the Tao Te Ching says, have faith in the way things are. Not the Christian faith, like have faith that God exists and that Jesus was his son, and then, you must believe in him or you'll have eternal happiness or eternal damnation. Not that kind of faith, but faith 100% with the way things are in this present moment. It's a completely different attitude. And a lot of that it could be very helpful for people, like people listening in who maybe click on this video and feel completely trapped. They're at their wits' end and they have nowhere to go. First off, I've been there, and I'm sure you've been there too. And it seems like the theme of this conversation is don't look outside yourself. Turn the attention back. As painful as you think that might be, try it. Turn it back. Be anxious. Be depressed. 100%. In fact, make friends with it. Go along with the river. And the river is this moment. So, yeah.
Yeah, there was a guided meditation I used to do, and she says Lao Tzu says this. I'm not sure if he does or not, but it's by letting go, it all gets done.
Yeah.
And
by letting go, all things. Yeah.
Yeah, by letting go, it all gets done. Is it kind of that's what became one of the mantras too, for me,
Yeah.
was by letting go, it all gets done, and just really repeating that on, while I go run or, go throughout my day. It kind of just became a little
and
mantra.
it reminds me of the guy, I can't remember his name, the guy who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful title. That's a beautiful title because that's basically, in other words, our American way of saying, let go. We say, fuck it. I don't give a fuck. That kind of thing. It means let go. Let go. It doesn't mean don't care. It doesn't mean don't, do things, but really we gotta let go. And that also leads into memento mori, which was the other conversation I think we should have, is about death and being mindful of death. Because being truly mindful of death is allow us to let go, to really let go, to be willing to die at any moment. Yeah. So a lot of this is framing. A lot of it is looking back at the source of anxiety, the source of our issues, rather than trying to fix it from some outside thing.
Yeah. So attachment also being one of the roots.
Oh, yeah, attachment. Well, we need to have a conversation about that alone because, again, from my perspective, and I've said this many times in I have a separate YouTube channel which I'm trying to create about this subject, but is that we think we are separate selves, personalities that have things, that have a body, that have eyes, that see, and this kind of thing. And that is fundamentally at its root, as we said in the last podcast, it's fundamentally an illusion. And to really, really live our life from the place that recognizes that illusion is, I think, what's going to heal humanity and heal ourselves. I mean, first off, you got to heal yourself. You want humanity to be great, we got to first look out for number one, which is us. So, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, with the need to change everybody else, I mean, it's already started with the wrong intention, you know?
Right. People don't need to change. You have to change. And,
yeah.
But once you see how you've changed, it's really an important thing. You see, it's a difficult thing to say. It's like, you want to change the world. That's probably not the best intention, but a better intention is once you've found some tricks and tools that have helped you, don't be silent about them. Make
Plant
sure
seeds.
you tell people.
Plant seeds.
Those seeds. You got to. Don't be, and that's the hard part of like sounding condescending or like, like, oh, who is this guy to tell me what I need? And I get, that's understandable, but if you have something that has helped you, share it, because there are other people who are going through what you've gone through, and like people may be listening to this, the 13 people that will probably listen to this podcast. Anxiety affects all of us, and or many of us, and there is a way out. There is a different way, and most of the time, the anxiety is perpetuated because we're just simply going in the wrong direction. And we should share that once we've learned it.
And if you have other ways too.
Right. There's many other ways.
There's
never one way for everyone. Yeah. It's got to be many, many other ways. So.
Well, I was just saying, if anyone else has any other ways, then feel free to share.
Please, yeah, put it in the comments.
I encourage you.
Maybe we can talk about it, and yeah. So. Well, I know. I mean, there's so much to cover with anxiety and mental health. That's kind of I have 2 YouTube channels. This one, and then I'm gonna get the other one going, which is really gonna hit base on all of these questions, but particularly from meditation, that kind of point of view. So,
yeah. All right.
Maybe
sounds good.
Yeah. Anyway, what else is there? Any other thoughts?
There's plenty of thoughts on anxiety that we touch on, but ideas But we're hitting our hour mark here.
Yeah, we've hit the hour mark. That's why I'm trying to close it up a little bit. But yeah, it was a really good pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's a bit different from the free will conversation.
Yeah.
But
me too.
I think it all kind of connects in the sense that living from the place of it all connects. It all connects in some way. So
yeah. Absolutely.
All right, brother. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't. I'm looking forward to our next conversation too. What are we talking about next time? Do we know?
We should. You know what I want to talk about next time? I think would be good is after this conversation, we should talk about memento mori.
Okay.
The taboo of death in our culture, and how we sweep it under the rug and try to consider it later.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really great to talk about how important it is to be mindful of death at every moment. And the Christians historically have a really good tradition about being mindful of death, hence memento mori, which is the Latin phrase of be mindful of death. And they would they would say dying daily. It was a practice of theirs, particularly the Desert Fathers. So anyway, let's talk about that next time.
I think that's one of my laws, actually. I've told you about my...
Oh, I want to talk about that too.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that too.
It was one
podcast. We should have a whole separate podcast for your model that you have. I think that'd be really cool. But let me think about it a lot, and then I think it'd be fun to talk about
the triangulation thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you get it. I think we have to talk about it again before we do that kind of podcast. But
okay.
yeah, I'd like to Because I'm all about promoting people's ideas, particularly if they're useful. So,
Yeah.
and
All right.
I hope you're open to some criticism. I don't know what the criticism is yet, but I'm
For
sure
sure.
I'll have some. I'm
For
just
sure.
that kind of pretentious person.
I hope maybe I can squash it. We'll see.
Yeah,
A
you,
rebuttal.
you have an answer for it.
Yeah.
All right, brother. It was good to
All
talk
right.
to you.
Good
I'll
to
talk
talk
to
to
you
you.
next time, all right?
Sounds good.
All right. Later.
Later.